Good afternoon, everyone. This is Gretchen from Therap. Thank you for joining us today for our individual and family access user group. We're hoping to get some good conversation going here today. We have some providers who have jumped on as panelists, so we hope that you guys have lots of questions for them about how they have their individuals and families set up in Therap. I also have on with me from Therap, Letitia. And if you are all in listen only mode, so if you do have a question, please either raise your hand or type it in and we can unmute you. I'm going to go ahead and let everybody introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about their agency and how they're using Therap for individuals and families. So Justin, I'll let you start with you.
Okay. Hello, I'm Justin Stewart. I work at A Better Way of Living, a small agency in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and we have family members, so mom and dad, who are guardians also, who use Therap for checking in on their daughter a lot. It's been really helpful in keeping them on the same page and comfortable without having to send thousands and thousands of faxes and reports to them. And we do have a few people also working on doing their own self-advocacy and signing off on their own medication. And that's about where we're at this point. Who's next? Heidi?
Hi. Okay, so I'm Heidi Green. I work at the Arc of Ulster Green in the Hudson Valley area of New York. We have several individuals that have their own access to Therap for different reasons. The most popular reason is so that they can document their med administration on their own. We have a few people that use their own devices to document on the full website, on a laptop or a tablet. And we also have people that just use their smartphones, as well as some family members that are just viewing usually ISP data documentation, occasionally health tracking documentation as well. I think that's about everything.
Vicki, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Vicki Yurdy. I work at the Arc of Ulster Green, the Arc of Dutchess, and the Arc of Putnam. Heidi's already spoken to what we're currently doing for folks at the Arc of Ulster Green. For the Arc of Dutchess and the Arc of Putnam, we're just beginning conversations regarding access for individuals and for families. So they're taking a lot of their information off of what we're currently doing at the Arc of Ulster Green.
Wonderful. And we also have Susan. You want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Susan Lindsay. I work for KCCDD in Galesburg, Illinois. We're just a small day program. We serve about 375 individuals. But we do not provide any residential services. We started a little, probably about 6 months ago or so with 3 individuals to start using Therap, and we started them with entering their own T-logs. They have SCOMs with just a small limited group of people. They can go in, they can see their programs and things like that. And then our plan is that after the first of the year, they will start entering their own data on all of their programs. And we have not opened it up to private guardians at this point, but we have opened it up to the Office of State Guardianship for individuals who have state guardianship. And then we also have our ISC service coordinators that have access to the individuals that they support. So we, those individuals have had access for probably about 3-4 years now, but with the individuals themselves, we're right at about 6 months. So.
Wonderful. So I'm hoping that we have some users in the audience who have some questions for these folks about their individuals or their family access. If not, Steve and Letitia and I have questions that we can always ask, but it's always a lot more fun if we have people who are using the system ask those questions. So if you either want to type them in or raise your hand, and again we can unmute you. Otherwise, the three of us will start asking questions. Oh, this is going to be a quiet group today. Okay, so I guess my first question is for those of you who are, well, you guys are obviously using Therap for your individuals and family. Do you have policies in place, or do you have your family sign off on accessing Therap, and what kind of policies do you have regarding that?
I'll go ahead. We have what we've developed is a user agreement that's specific for outside users. The individuals sign it as well as their guardian if they don't have their own guardianship. And that has worked out pretty well for us. We have that for all outside users. And then we provide, depending on the access the individual has, then we provide some training with me on how to access all of the information. We don't want to just give them access and then say, here you go, and them try to figure it out. So we have actual formal training that I do with outside users as well.
That's kind of what we have too, an outside user agreement, and I've trained the guardians over the phone too, because they actually live in a remote part of New Mexico from where we're providing services for their daughter. It's been pretty successful too for them. They've enjoyed the access. We also actually too have a policy written in, not just an agreement though too, for our agency's policies and procedures.
What we ended up doing for Ulster Green was to look at our HIPAA policy and actually incorporate the requests for Therap access into our HIPAA policy and agreements. So essentially what happens, we have our programs or whoever it is that identifies that there is a request to come in and give access to an individual or to a guardian. They go ahead and fill out a request form for that information. When they do that, we actually have some additional discussion as to what kind of access they're really looking for in case they're interested in one aspect of therapy, but maybe not the other. We try to tie that in with having the request finalized by going through the HIPAA process after we've gone ahead and had those discussions, so that we're not out of compliance with our HIPAA policy. So as soon as we have all the signatures and we've all agreed that yes, this person is going to have an account, then we'll go ahead and schedule time to meet with them and to actually walk them through the process of logging in and train them on how to use the system. But we time that so when they actually submit their request for the HIPAA release, that we're staying within the 30 days of actually giving them that access to that information. And that's really important because if we're outside of that, then we could end up having some issues with audits.
So one of the questions that came in was, I think this was directed more towards Susan. They asked that, it says, did I hear correctly that service recipients will enter their own data?
Right now, they're entering their own T-logs, and the intent is after the first of the year that, yes, they will begin entering their own data when their programs are ran.
And here at Ulster Green, yes, we do have people entering their own data, but only for med administration. It is not, it's actually not allowed in New York State for the individuals to enter their own service documentation. And I hear in most states that's the case. And at Ulster Green, we don't have T-logs or SCOMs open to people receiving services at this time, or to family or guardians. That is limited to staff communication currently.
So we in New Mexico don't have it open either, but we have been with talks with different therapists. Instead of it just being service agreements, it's also like self-identifying, like emotion charting and goal charting for them to help motivate them, and also kind of see how our staff work. So it's not such a weird concept for them, to help incorporate them in their own lives too. Give them a little more of a driving force, I guess.
Yeah, for those states where you really can't bill off of a service that is documented by an individual, the staff have to document, you could add additional documentation that's really specific for the individual. It's not something that could be billed off of, but you could allow then the individual to be able to go in and maybe document on the same goals, but you wouldn't be billing off of that information. You would still rely on the staff to document and bill off the information the staff are entering. That does give you a really good idea of what the individual's interpretation of how things are going, how they're feeling about their particular service.
Another question that came in was, how would you recommend starting, or who would you recommend starting with, individuals or family members first?
This is Susan. We started with just individuals just because it was going to be easier for us to work with them because we have that day-to-day contact and those types of things, and just kind of working it as a pilot, as kind of what we called it, before we open it up to the individual guardians. That's kind of how it's working for us.
With looking for who to actually initially start with, you may want to have some conversations with your self-advocacy groups to get their input as to what kind of access they might be interested in, but they may be able to give you some tips as to how to best approach the documentation, what they might be interested in looking at. But they would be able to give you a lot of feedback as to the process when you initially start to pilot.
The next one says, for providers using medication administration, how does that work? Is there training up front? Do they, if there are errors, do they complete the GER?
Okay, I can speak to that. So for the people that have the access to document their med administration on Therap, they typically have already begun independently documenting their med administration in another way. So here we would have people using paper MARs that would allow them to sign off in real time without having to have their own computer access. And there were several people, and there still are people that have been doing this for years, documenting on this paper. And then of course that's left to either the nurse to then store that paper document, or for a staff member to transfer documentation from the paper MAR to the electronic MAR. So the people that currently document on Therap are experienced with doing that type of documentation. However, it's a whole different world documenting on an electronic MAR. So there's absolutely training done for that difference in process. And for the most part, the people that are doing their own MAR documentation are doing routine on time documentation only. If anything's out of the ordinary or has to be done in detail mode, that's something they'll typically hand off to a staff member.
Okay, Vicky and Heidi, this one's for you because it has to do with HAB plans. Does your agency give access to HAB plans, which are the typical documents that are shared?
Yes. We give access to those, to ISP plans, or soon to be life plans, because that's part of the information that an individual would typically have access to anyhow. They're provided that by their care coordinator or MSC. So they'll have view access. They're not going to be able to document on their goals, but they will have view access to the information. And again, that keep in mind that is based on whether or not the individual even wants that access.
Okay. The next question is, we have not began to have family use sections. With the families, are there any you would not share? So kind of module specific, which modules are you sharing, not sharing?
So for us, T-logs are internal documentation, and our staff are the only ones who use them. So we don't share T-logs and would not plan on sharing those.
Like I had said earlier, we also don't share the T-logs with, that's limited to staff communication at this time, as well as SCOMs.
GER information is not shared, just due to the nature of the information and the potential to have other HIPAA information for individuals aside from the one person that the individual or the family member may be privy to.
Okay. And then the next question we have is, could you expand about what you're using T-logs for that service recipients are entering? So I think that one's for you, Susan.
Yeah, we use T-logs to report a variety of different things. We don't use it as a communication tool between staff. It is just to report things on individuals. They participated in a certain activity. They might have gone somewhere in the community, things like that. And so what we've done is we have created a summary type list that our employees use for doing T-logs. And then we created a modified version for the clients to use that are working in Therap. And it was interesting because one of the things that staff will report on in a T-log is we have certain behaviors we do in a GER, and then we have certain ones that we will do in a T-log, and that's just based off of our incident reporting with the state of Illinois. And so we had a situation that was really kind of interesting where an employee had written a T-log on an individual in a behavioral situation that had occurred, and that individual actually looked at their list of their summary titles that they have and chose advocacy and wrote a T-log to give their version of what they felt had occurred with that behavior. And it was really interesting. And so that's one of the ways that we use it, is just to report different things that happen throughout a day with an individual. And we have some individuals who may not have any T-logs at all for days and days. And then others who might have one or two a day. We don't use them for every single thing. It's just things that may not be addressed in a regular formal ISP program, or like I said, just if they did specific activities, especially if it's something that may be out of the ordinary for that person, that you normally, their participation level is very low, and they really like this particular activity, so we wanted to document that. So that's kind of how we use the T-logs.
Okay. Don't forget for the attendees, if you guys have questions, definitely keep typing them in. Next thing I want to, there's a new question right there. I'll go to that next. What the general modules that what are the general modules that guardians usually request to view access, since T-logs, SCOMs, or GERs are not shared?
We've actually been asked more frequently about T-logs and getting access to those probably more than anything, and those are considered staff-to-staff communication. So unfortunately, at this point, we've had to let them know that and not be able to give that information. So aside from that, medical information. is probably our primary.
Okay. And I mean, this is just, I mean, obviously we have a panel of people that are definitely doing this. I think it varies, you know, for sure by agencies. So there's definitely some agencies that, you know, do share T-logs. There are some agencies that, you know, do allow SCOMs or limited SCOM to certain staff members. Um, and the two self-advocates that work for Therap, Jen and Lori, they both do SCOMs as well. So there are some agencies using those. GERs is definitely a big one that I hear is something that people typically don't share. That one seems to be pretty standard. But as far as all the other modules, I mean, it really varies, you know, from agency to agency.
Justin, what does your agency allow your guardians to have?
So for guardians, we allow medical visit paperwork. They're able to look at our ISP programs too. We do not allow SCOMs. We prefer traditional communication with that. So they contact our service coordinators or care coordinators in general with questions that they have. We tend not to let them use GERs or the MAR. And I'm trying to think what are the other ones. They obviously don't have T-logs. I think that's about it. It's all the health modules, and the MAR is not part of that, and then ISP programs. So they can see a lot of the basic daily charting and then the healthcare stuff that they're really interested in. And then we also have time tracking that we use, so they can always see sleep patterns too with their individual, which is how we track sleep patterns.
Great. So next question, what was, and this is kind of for all of you guys, what was your biggest challenge getting family members and or self-advocates online?
Tech support. I think that at first the family was using an older Mac and Opera, and I didn't know anything about it because I'm a Windows person, and so I didn't even know if she was up to date. But eventually they found a new computer, and I talked to them a little bit through getting everything up to date, and now they're on regularly.
We really, I kind of struggled quite a bit for a few years with just getting buy-in from the agency and staff, mainly because, you know, everybody's concerned. They don't want to give the access and have something negative happen as a result. So there's a lot of concern around that. The fact that, you know, not all staff have great comments that are written. So, you know, is there going to be basically a problem with somebody seeing a comment and not liking the way something is written about an individual? So things like that, they were very concerned about. But once we started really working through C2L and the accreditation process, that really got their buy-in. They started to understand why having that kind of access set up would be really helpful and beneficial to the individual and potentially advocates and guardians.
I'd just like to add to that. I didn't come into this picture until after Vicki had already started providing access to family members, and but once we got the first person actually documenting their med administration, the word kind of got around, and then other people that lived in her residence became excited about doing the same. And then as people attended more self-advocacy meetings, including a self-advocacy meeting where Lori and Jen actually attended and came and spoke to the people at their meeting, then people got excited about it. So I feel like we go through waves where we'll have like 3 or 4 people interested, and then there'll be a time when we don't. So it varies.
Okay. Um, and this is for everybody again. But would you like to share a story or two of things that come to mind about how this has, had a positive impact for the individuals you're supporting, with family members?
I think that for the 3 individuals that we've started with, I think that it has given them more opportunity for that self-advocacy that we try to, achieve so much, and it's so difficult to do in with many individuals. So I think it has helped with that a lot. I think it also gives them, I don't want to say control, but a little bit more influence on some of the things that they see in Therap, that they can go back to their case manager and talk to them about some of the things that staff have entered, things like that. And it also, because they have the opportunity for the SCOM between them, the only people they have access to for their SCOM is their case manager and their DSPs. They're the only ones that they have access for SCOMs. But that gives them an opportunity then to also to have a little bit more independence. What we're wanting them to do is go in and let the queue know if they're not going to be there because they have a doctor's appointment or something like that. Again, our situation is a little different because we don't do residential, so we don't know about individuals' appointments and things like that. So we have one in particular. She's really into using Therap, and so she will send an SCOM and say, oh, just want to let you know I'm not going to be there on Monday because of whatever reason. So I just think it's been really good for them to have that independence and that more opportunity for self-advocacy that we hadn't thought about before. I know for us, we're pretty excited about this, and we want to start expanding once we see how these 3 individuals go. We did talk to them because, like I said, after the first year, we want to start working with them on entering data. And they're so excited about that they don't want to wait. But because of some turnover that we've had in our case managers and stuff, that's the reason we're holding off on that right now. So I just think it's been really good for them and their their independence, and they just seem excited about it. So.
We just had another question come in that says, we gave access through the state service coordination account. Are other states doing it this way? Brad, can you tell us what state you're from in the chat or in the question box? But does anybody else have states that are giving access?
Now, we've given access, but we're just a private. I mean, we're not, Illinois is not a state that, requires Therap or anything, but our individual service coordinators all have access that work for the state.
Okay, Brad's in Nebraska. Justin, in the state of New Mexico, since you guys are using it statewide, is it given through your account as an agency, or is it given through the state of New Mexico account?
Right now, the state of New Mexico, so service coordinators are all in-house in whatever service that is provided by your agency. So we have our own agency service coordinators. Case managers have oversight account access through the state and their own case management accounts now, which started this year, I think, or maybe a little bit at the end of last year. And then the state also provides accounts for therapists, so occupational therapists, behavior therapists, physical therapists, what other therapists are there? Speech language pathologists. There we go. They provide them with an SCOM access, so it's basically the email access, and then we can send them stuff securely. We've had mixed issues in the states reviewing opening up the access for outside entities. So for BSCs, giving them some oversight access in the sense of just being able to look at the healthcare stuff within our files. It's a little hairy at times. I've been pushed to give account access and maintain account access for therapists, and I like what I think Heidi was talking about, or maybe Vicky, with outside entities and HIPAA compliance, like building it into where these people are granted access by the guardian and the individual signing off on it, and that would set up a lot of help because right now ISP data, which is our main progress note charting and goal tracking stuff, isn't available even to the state. They don't look at ISP data, I think, directly either and can't through their oversight accounts. If that answered the question.
Thank you. I mean, to talk a little bit, about Brad, about your state there, Nebraska. Nebraska has started to let family members and guardians have access, and that's being done, sort of at the state level, or as you said, the service coordination account. And what they're currently doing is giving access to individual data forms, individual support plans, ISP programs and data, the individual budget, care plans, homepage, and behavior plans. So just a different perspective, and that's something that's being done at a state level.
Vicky, you mentioned, CQL. Has CQL and CARF played a factor in allowing access and writing it into your policies about giving access?
It kind of opened the door, really, because it was really pushing staff to really think about how somebody may be able to advocate for themselves, access to their own information, and being able to provide access to an electronic system at this point in our agency is really key. A lot of the information can't be found in a paper file anymore. So to really allow people access and be able to educate individuals on where their information actually lives, was really key in this. I don't think we would have gotten as far as we have without that kind of drive from the CQL perspective. Does that answer your question?
Definitely, thank you. Anybody else have any questions? We had a lot of good questions going on there.
I have a question, even though I'm one of the panelists.
Oh, yes, please.
Because we have not opened it up to private guardians yet, with the way that we have like the OSG and all of them set up, and we have our individual clients, I've got that how I want that. But private guardians is one of the things that I'm just not sure of. And what I wanted to know is, are other organizations, are they setting up individual guardians with their own individual super roles, or are you doing just a generic guardians and these are what they have access to? I just kind of like some feedback on that.
We ended up going the route of really looking at each access being really unique and individualized. So whether it's a personal representative, guardian, or advocate for that person, or the individual themselves, we're really talking to them beforehand to find out what they actually want access to, and to allow that flexibility to accommodate what their specific requests are. We really have to provide a unique caseload and a unique super role for those folks. Otherwise, you just don't have the flexibility, and you end up really needing to say, okay, well, this is what you have access to. And that may be too much information compared to what they want, especially for individuals. If an individual or you have a family member or guardian who struggles with using technology, having more information on the screen may be confusing. So being able to kind of narrow it down to the information that they're
Thank you.
For us with guardianship too, we have one super role. The caseloads are all very set up individual on an individual basis, a single individual caseload, obviously. But all guardians have to be appointed through the Office of Guardianship and a court order in the state of New Mexico. So we don't treat them differently. They have the same access, whether it's through a state-sponsored guardianship or it's a relative or a personal guardian.
Okay. The next question that came in was, what would the group say regarding the staff role or job duties for someone who manages access and type of accounts, including documentation and training? Also, how much time would this role take in your experience?
Could you repeat the first part of that? How did the staff responsibilities?
Yeah, I think it's more like as you guys, I think a lot of you guys are the, Therap admins or provider admins. So what's your role, or if it is somebody else at your agency, and job duties for managing this type of access and the accounts, including documentation and training?
Well, I personally, myself or Vicky, whoever receives the email first, we'll review the request. We send out the process to the person's team, and the process itself, which is actually one of the handouts here, explains everything that should be discussed with that person that's interested in learning about the access, whether it's the individual receiving services or a family member or an advocate. The entire team needs to have that discussion without us necessarily. And then any issues or concerns that might come up within that discussion, we will then discuss further to make sure anything's addressed. If there's concern with viewing certain areas of the account, certain types of access that someone might feel could be an issue for the person. And once that is worked out, and there have been times that the team decided that it would not be appropriate for someone to have access to documentation that might be upsetting to them. But once that is worked out, which for the most part it is, I take care of putting together training documents for the person to follow. And I also do a one-on-one training with the person, and of course give them my contact information so that they can reach me if they need anything, password reset, need to be walked through finding something, pulling some type of report. So we're just always here for anything that comes up that the person might need. Maybe they want to, increase access, decrease access, any kind of adjustments. We're available for that, just like we are for our staff members.
For us, it's kind of a couple of cogs at work. It's really hard for me and my counterpart to keep track of all the guardians and different appointees, especially corporate guardians who sometimes get reassigned kind of often. So we rely on our service coordinators who attend IDT meetings to keep us in the loop of who is still guardian or if it's changed and if we need to change their access that way. So there are a couple cogs that work in that system. And the requests usually come through our service coordinators to me or my counterpart.
And sort of the second part of that question was, how much time do you think this role takes up of your job responsibilities?
Right now, for me, it probably takes up very little because we haven't had a lot of requests lately, but it comes and goes. Also, the support for it also sometimes can take at first, depending on how savvy someone is with computers, it can take a couple hours, or it could be a short 30-minute introduction session and just guiding them through the modules and what they want to find.
Okay. Our next question is anyone allowing non-guardian family member access?
No.
No.
We do have it written into the process, but that does have to be approved by a guardian and the individual, as well as our corporate compliance, QA, QM department. But we don't have anybody that has requested that access who is a non-guardian or an individual.
Okay.
Another question was, while individuals cannot document as available service data, have individuals' personal outcome measures or rights reviews been affected by inclusion or access to Therap?
I don't believe we've had any instance in which palm interviews have really come into play, specifically for an individual who wants access. That's something we would have to check with a small person about the situation where it's been requested.
Does anybody else have any other questions?
Can I ask one more question?
Of course.
The ISP plans, when all of us have been talking about the different modules and things that we've given access to individuals, no one has said anything about the ISP plan. Is there anyone doing that? We are, but ours is very limited. In Illinois, the ISCs are now doing the individual plans instead of us. And so it's been kind of a process that we've been going through. We're actually about a little over a year into that. So trying to get those ISP plans into Therap has just been a challenge for us anyway, but we are giving access, but I'm not hearing anyone else that's giving that. Just was wondering if they are, and it just hasn't come up, and in what capacity are you doing that?
We do provide view access for ISP plans and what will ultimately end up being life plans here in New York. Simply view access to guardians, individuals if they've requested it as well.
Okay.
So in New Mexico, the ISP plan is written and the responsibility of case managers who are independent of any agency providing services. So we don't usually use the ISP plan module, but we do house the ISP plan on the IDF every year.
Okay.
Do any of our panelists have any other questions for either individuals or each other, since we're all in different states?
I had a question. Do you guys use, for those who have their individuals doing the MAR, do you use the app for them? Is it easier, the app?
It depends on the type of type of device that the person has. While they're welcome to use our agency computers, just the login process for them to get onto Therap can be a little tricky. So it's typically people that have a laptop or a tablet or a smartphone. And for those with tablets and smartphones, yes, I will show them how to document on the app, in addition to the MAR on the full website. And there were actually a couple of people that received access last year that, to my surprise, after I trained them on how to use it on just their laptop, they just went ahead and got the app themselves, and they figured it out on their own before even scheduling the second part of the training. Yeah, I didn't want to overwhelm them, but the one gentleman, I called him to schedule the training for the app documentation, and he was like, I already got it, I already did it, I'm doing it. It's like, okay. So yes, they are using the app.
That's cool. I have my first self-advocate, hopefully, that will be coming on board to do her own meds by that. And that's kind of exciting because I think that the app might be easier for her, just because it gives times instead of like all the meds all in front of her face.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it is. I think it is easier to view on the app, especially when you know that you only need these 3 things at this time of day. It's less confusing.
Yeah.
You know.
I know we had this conversation yesterday with Jen and Lori, and I think it's Lori who likes the computer and Jen who likes her tablet to document. So they're split 50-50. But again, it's a comfort level for, who has who, I think Lori likes it better because she can use the mouse on the computer, whereas Jen very much likes the touchscreen on her tablet.
It also comes down to connectivity at our agency, because for those that are in our residential programs, there is Wi-Fi available for them to log into, but it's not something that they do routinely, so they're not necessarily comfortable with it. But for those that have a tablet or a smartphone that's connected to, Verizon or AT&T, they don't have to go through that additional step of connecting to the internet because they're already there. So I think it's a little easier in those cases.
Susan, what devices do your folks use?
They're actually, excuse me, 2 of them are just using agency computers. And then the other one, she has a smartphone, so she uses it on her phone as well as agency computers.
Does anybody else have any other questions for our panelists today? Well, thank you all for joining us. We hope you found this helpful. Panelists Susan, Heidi, Vicki, Justin, thank you so much for answering the questions. This will get posted later, probably early next week, on our website for anybody who is interested. Vicki did share their policy, their access policy. Like I said, or like it was mentioned earlier, it is in the handout section if anybody would like to take a look at that. And we look forward to you guys joining us on our next individual and family access webinar. Thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.